Your brother loves your fiancée more than you do. You should let them marry. My dad standing beside the cheating couple and defending them. I walked away calmly. Now I live freely and happily, while they have fallen into misery. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I was just dropping off another check for their mortgage, like I had done every month for 8 years. But the moment I opened the door, the world I thought I knew collapsed. My fiancée Emily's car was parked outside, and inside, she was sitting on the couch, holding hands with my younger brother Kevin. For a second, none of them noticed me. Then the keys slipped from my hand and hit the floor, echoing through the silence. Emily froze, Kevin went pale, and my mother stepped out of the kitchen, her face already full of guilt. In that instant, I realized the truth. Everyone I loved had betrayed me. My name's David, I'm 34 years old and I work as a data analyst in Seattle. I earn well, I have my own house, and until a year ago I thought my life was going smoothly. I was engaged to Emily, a woman I met 5 years ago at a conference. She was fun, charismatic, and made me feel like anything was possible. We were going to get married on a farm outside the city, but everything fell apart when I discovered she was cheating on me with my younger brother, Kevin, and that my parents, Robert and Brenda, knew about it and didn't tell me anything. For 8 years I had been paying the mortgage on my parents' house. They had a financial crisis when my dad lost his job, and since I had a good salary, I offered to help. In total it was $170,000. It wasn't easy, but I did it because it was my family. I thought they would do the same for me. How naive. Kevin, my 28-year-old brother, was always the opposite of me. I was the responsible one, the one who always had everything under control. He, on the other hand, jumped from one temporary job to another without a clear direction. My parents always defended him, saying he would find his way. It never bothered me too much, but sometimes it frustrated me that he didn't try harder. Still, we were close, or so I thought. The first sign that something was wrong was on my mom's birthday, about 6 months before the wedding. We were at their house having dinner together. Emily was next to me, laughing as always, but Kevin was strange, quiet. Normally, he was the life of the party, telling exaggerated stories. That night he barely spoke and avoided eye contact when Emily said something. I thought he was upset about a problem at work. I didn't think much of it. The months went by and Emily started acting strange. She was distant, always on her phone, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said it was stress from the wedding. I believed her because planning a wedding is a mess, but something didn't add up. One night, after a long day at the office, I decided to stop by my parents' house to drop off a check for the mortgage. I didn't call ahead because I never did. When I arrived, I saw Emily's car in the driveway. It seemed strange because she hadn't told me she would be there. I thought maybe she was visiting my mom, since they got along well. I went in without making a sound, hoping to surprise them. What I saw left me frozen. Emily and Kevin were on the couch, too close, holding hands. They didn't see me until my keys fell to the floor. Emily jumped up with a panicked look on her face, while Kevin babbled something nonsensical. My mom came out of the kitchen when she heard me, and my dad appeared behind her with an expression I couldn't interpret. What's going on? I asked, trying to stay calm, although I felt like my chest was going to explode. David, it's not what you think, Emily said, but her voice was trembling. How long? I asked, looking at Kevin. He didn't answer. My mom tried to intervene. David, sit down. Let's talk. How long? I repeated, louder. 6 months, Kevin muttered without looking at me. 6 months. While I was planning my wedding with Emily, while I was paying the mortgage on the house where they were sitting, my fiancé and my brother were betraying me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that my parents knew. Their faces showed no surprise, only guilt. You knew? I asked, feeling the floor move. My dad tried to speak. David, we didn't want to hurt you. We thought it was better to wait. Wait for what? For me to marry someone who was cheating on me with my brother? I shouted. Nobody said anything. Emily started to cry, but I felt nothing for her. Only rage and a sadness I couldn't process. I grabbed my keys and left. I didn't say another word. That night in my apartment, I sat with a beer and tried to understand how everything had fallen apart. I felt stupid. The signs were there. Kevin acting weird, Emily distant, my parents avoiding the wedding topic when we were all together. But I was so busy with my work and keeping my family afloat that I didn't see it. The following days were hell. Emily sent me messages and emails, but I didn't reply. Kevin called me once, and I hung up as soon as I heard his voice. My parents also tried to contact me, but I didn't want to listen to them. Every time I thought of them, I saw their faces that night, knowing everything and keeping it quiet. I decided to cut all contact. I changed my number, blocked their emails, and stopped going to the family home. But there was something else I had to decide, the mortgage. For 8 years I had paid every month without fail, sacrificing things for myself. Also my parents wouldn't lose their house. But now, knowing they had betrayed me, I couldn't continue. I called the bank and canceled the automatic payments. I didn't tell my parents, I owed them nothing. A couple of months passed, and I received an invitation in the mail. It was for Emily and Kevin's wedding at the same farm I had chosen with her. It included a note from my dad. We hope you come, son. We want you to be part of this day. I tore the invitation into pieces. How did they have the nerve to invite me as if they hadn't destroyed everything? My father walked my ex-fiancée down the aisle at her wedding to my younger brother, saying her father couldn't come. My father also couldn't pay his mortgage after I stopped paying it. I'm David, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a data analyst in Seattle. I earn well, I have my own house, and until a year ago, I thought my life was going smoothly. I was engaged to Emily, a woman I met 5 years ago at a conference. She was fun, charismatic, and made me feel like anything was possible. We were going to get married on a farm outside the city, but everything fell apart when a friend, Brian, told me something that left me speechless. At the wedding, my dad was going to walk Emily down the aisle. Emily's dad was healthy, but my dad agreed to take his place, saying it was an honor. He was going to give a speech saying, Emily's father couldn't come, but I'm proud to be here. It was as if they wanted to rub it in my face. That was too much. I checked my parents' accounts, which I still had access to. The mortgage was overdue, and the bank had already sent foreclosure notices. Without my payments, they couldn't keep up. A part of me felt guilty, but the other part thought they should pay the consequences. The following days were strange. I felt like I was floating, as if all this were happening to someone else. I locked myself in my routine, work, gym, a beer with friends. But every night, when I got to my apartment, the rage returned. It wasn't just about Emily or Kevin, it was about my parents. They, who always talked about the importance of family, had left me in the lurch. Knowing that my dad was going to walk Emily down the aisle saying that ridiculous line about her father burned me up inside. It was as if they wanted to erase what they did to me, as if my pain didn't matter. I didn't go to the wedding, obviously. I couldn't imagine sitting there watching my brother marry my ex while my dad played the proud father. But Brian, my friend who was invited, kept me updated. He told me the wedding was smaller than what Emily and I had planned. The farm was still nice, but there were fewer guests, fewer flowers, less everything. He said my dad gave his speech, but it sounded forced, as if he were trying to convince everyone that this was normal. Emily and Kevin smiled in the photos, but Brian noticed something was off. There was a tension in their eyes, as if they were acting. Meanwhile, the bank didn't wait. The mortgage notifications turned into an eviction order. My parents lost the house they had lived in for 30 years. Brian told me they had to move into a small apartment with Kevin and Emily. It was a cramped one-bedroom place in an old building near downtown. I couldn't imagine it. My parents, who always had their house full of memories, now crammed into a space where they could barely fit. A part of me felt bad, but then I remembered that night in their living room when they didn't defend me, and the guilt faded. I didn't talk to them, but Brian passed on the gossip. He said that living together in the apartment was a disaster. Emily, who was always a bit spoiled, complained that there was no space. Kevin, who was still jumping from job to job, wasn't earning enough to support 4 people. My parents, who no longer had a stable income, depended completely on him. The tension started to grow, and fast. One night, Brian invited me for a drink and told me more. He said that Emily and Kevin fought all the time. She wanted a more comfortable life, but Kevin could barely pay the bills. My parents, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but only made things worse. My mom, according to Brian, was depressed, missing her house. My dad, who was always the one to keep calm, was starting to lose his patience. He even yelled at Kevin in front of Emily once about taking responsibility for once. That surprised me because my dad never raised his voice. I, meanwhile, continued with my life. I started going out more, meeting new people. I even had a couple of dates, though nothing serious. I went to therapy, which helped a bit. My therapist told me I was processing the betrayal and that I needed time, but what helped me the most was realizing it wasn't my fault. I had given everything for my family. Time, money, effort, and they paid me back with lies. Stopping the mortgage payments wasn't just out of anger. It was because I was tired of being the one who always carried everything. One day I received an email from my mom. It was the first time she had tried to contact me since I cut communication. She said she was very sorry, that they didn't know how to handle things, that they never wanted to hurt me. She ended by asking me to help them with the new apartment, that things were difficult. I read it, deleted it, and didn't reply. It wasn't my problem. Not anymore. A month later, Brian called me with fresh news. He said things in the apartment had gotten worse. Emily and Kevin were on the verge of splitting up. She complained that Kevin wasn't what she expected and that living with my parents was unbearable. Kevin, for his part, was stressed working double shifts as a delivery driver to pay off the mounting debts. My parents weren't much help. My mom spent her days watching TV and my dad tried to fix things in the apartment that didn't need fixing just to keep himself busy. The craziest part came later. Brian told me that Emily had started seeing another guy, a wealthy lawyer she met at a work event. It wasn't clear if she was still with Kevin or if she had already left him, but things weren't looking good. Kevin, according to Brian, was a mess. He had lost weight, looked exhausted, and once he saw him arguing with Emily on the street, yelling at her that he couldn't go on like this. My parents, trapped in that apartment, had nowhere to go. The idea of my family falling apart should have hurt me, but I felt nothing, just a kind of cold relief. I started thinking about karma. I'm not one to believe in that stuff, but it was hard not to see it. I had given everything for them, and they betrayed me. Now their decisions were catching up to them. Kevin, who never made an effort, was trapped in a marriage that was falling apart. Emily, who wanted to play both sides, was looking for an easy way out with someone else, and my parents, who chose to remain silent, had lost their home and their stability. I, on the other hand, was free. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. One night, while having a beer on my balcony, I thought about what would come next. I knew this wasn't over. Things between Kevin and Emily couldn't last much longer, and my parents weren't going to put up with living in that apartment forever. Something was going to break, and I wasn't going to be there to pick up the pieces. But a part of me, though I didn't want to admit it, was still waiting to see how this all ended. The weeks passed, and Brian, my friend, kept telling me how everything was falling apart. One afternoon, while we were having coffee, he told me that Emily had left Kevin. It was no surprise, but what came next left me speechless. Emily was engaged to a wealthy lawyer, a guy named Mark, who had a huge house on the outskirts of Seattle. According to Brian, she was pregnant. And although no one knew if the baby was Kevin's or Mark's, Emily acted as if her life with my brother had never happened. She posted photos on Instagram in expensive dresses, smiling next to Mark as if everything was perfect. Kevin, on the other hand, was at rock bottom. Brian saw him one night in a bar alone, with a lost look in his eyes and a warm beer in his hand. He had lost his delivery job after crashing his motorcycle in an accident. Without an income, the debts were drowning him. The apartment where he lived with my parents was a disaster. My parents, who depended on him, weren't helping. My mom spent her days crying, missing the house they lost. My dad, who was always the strong one, was starting to break. Brian told me he once heard them arguing with Kevin, with my dad yelling at him that this was his fault for not saying anything when the thing with David happened. That sentence hit me. It was the first time someone acknowledged that they had betrayed me. I, meanwhile, kept moving forward. My job as a data analyst was going well. I got a promotion that came with a nice raise. I started dating a girl, Sarah, whom I met in a cooking class. It wasn't anything serious, but she made me laugh, something I hadn't done in months. Therapy also helped. My therapist said I was rebuilding my confidence, and although it sounded cheesy, it was true. Every day, I felt a little freer, as if the weight of my family was fading away. One day I got a call from an unknown number. It was my dad. I don't know how he got my new number, but his voice sounded exhausted, as if he had aged 10 years. "David, please, we need to talk," he said. He told me things were bad. Kevin was devastated. Emily had abandoned them, and they didn't know how to get by. He asked me to meet, that he and my mom wanted to apologize. "It's not my problem," I said with a colder voice than I expected. "You chose your side when you walked Emily down the aisle." I hung up before he could answer. That call left me thinking, not about helping them, but about how they had gotten to this point. My parents, who always talked about loyalty, had turned their backs on me. Kevin, who never took anything seriously, was paying the price. And Emily, who wanted to play with everyone, had jumped to a new life without looking back. A few months later, Brian gave me more news. Kevin and my parents had been evicted from the apartment. They couldn't pay the rent, so they ended up in a cheap motel on the outskirts. Kevin talked about going to Portland to start over, but with no money and debts, that was more of a wish than a plan. My parents were living off favors, eating what some neighbors gave them. My mom, according to Brian, was in a deep depression, and my dad had gotten a part-time job at a gas station at 60 years old to pay for the motel. Once Brian saw them arguing outside, my dad yelling at my mom that this was all because of her decisions. I didn't know what he meant, but I imagined he was talking about not telling me the truth when they could have. Emily, meanwhile, seemed to be living the dream. Brian saw her in an expensive restaurant with Mark, wearing an engagement ring that shone from afar. She was pregnant, with a noticeable belly, and seemed happy. But Brian, who always notices things, said her smile seemed fake, as if she were acting. I didn't care. Emily had chosen her path, and if it was a lie, she could deal with it. One night, while having dinner with Sarah, Brian sent me a photo of Kevin. He was sitting in a park with wrinkled clothes and an empty stare. "I saw him today. I don't know how much longer he can take it," the message said. I looked at the photo for a second and deleted it. I didn't feel pity, but I didn't feel satisfaction either. Kevin had been my brother, the one who followed me everywhere when we were kids. But that Kevin no longer existed. The one in the photo was someone who chose to betray me. In a moment of curiosity, I checked Emily's Instagram. Her photos were pure luxury. Trips, expensive dinners, her posing with Mark. But among the comments, I saw one from an anonymous account that said, "How do you sleep knowing what you did to David?" I don't know who wrote it, but it made me smile. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because someone knew the truth. One afternoon, while walking downtown, I saw my dad from a distance. He was at the gas station cleaning a windshield with an old t-shirt. He seemed hunched over, as if the weight of everything had crushed him. For a moment I thought about approaching him, but I remembered his speech at the wedding saying he was proud to walk Emily down the aisle. I remembered his silence that night in the living room. I turned around and left. Months later, Brian gave me the latest gossip. Kevin had left Seattle. No one knew where, but they said he was in a shelter in Portland looking for work. My parents were still in the motel, living off the little my dad earned. Emily and Mark got married in a lavish ceremony, and she had a baby girl shortly after. But Brian heard that Mark was starting to doubt if the baby was his. I didn't care, let them solve their dramas. I was at peace. It wasn't perfect happiness, but it was a better freedom. I stopped carrying my family. Sarah and I are still dating, and although I don't know where it will lead us, I like how it feels. My job is going better than ever, and I'm planning a trip to Europe, something I've always wanted to do. My life is mine again, and I don't plan on looking back. Sometimes I think about them. About Kevin, lost somewhere, paying for his mistakes. About my parents, trapped in a motel regretting what they lost. About Emily, living a life that seems perfect, but that deep down must feel empty. I don't feel hatred or pity. Each one chose their path, and I chose mine. And I'm sure it's the right one.